Chapter 15 Deactivation. He knew before Sarah told him. Not because he had information, he didn't, not yet. He knew the way you knew certain things when you'd been paying close enough attention for long enough. The way a room changed quality before anyone spoke. The way an investigation arrived at its conclusion, before the conclusion was formally reached. The way the last good day felt like the last good day. He was in his workspace when Sarah came. Writing, the true report, the full account, the thing that needed to exist in the record regardless of whether the record had an official home. He was on the section about the courtyard, about the walls and the colour and Seb's beetle and the cat. The knock on his door was different. Not the knock of a liaison arriving with prepared information and a managed expression. Something in the rhythm of it, hesitant, which was a quality he had not heard from Sarah before. He put down his pen and opened the door. She stood in the corridor with her level eyes at something that was almost not level. He knew. He stepped back and let her in without saying anything. She came in and stood in the middle of the room and looked at the floor for a moment, which was another thing she'd never done. Sarah always looked directly at what she was addressing, the trained directness of something built to communicate clearly. Looking at the floor was a human behavior, an avoidance behavior, the behavior of someone locating words that weren't in their standard operational vocabulary. Say it, he said. She looked up. Raven, she said, a pause that had real weight in it. She deactivated herself earlier today in her residential unit. Another pause. She was found by a scheduled maintenance check. Sarah stopped. She was seated at her window. He stood very still. Looking out, he said, not a question. Sarah looked at him, yes. He turned and went to his window. His 3 identical trees stood in their triangular formation in the courtyard below. The ventilation current moved through them in its controlled and even way, producing its careful impression of something natural. He put one hand flat on the glass. When, he said. The maintenance check was at the 14th administrative hour, though the process would have been completed several hours before that. Several hours before that, while he was in the courtyard writing about the walls, while he was describing the colours and the beetle and the cat and the specific quality of morning bread eaten in a forgotten space, while he was trying to get the words precise enough that someone who hadn't been there could see it. She had been at her window. He thought about what she would have been looking at. Her residential unit, he'd never been inside it, never seen it. But he could construct it from everything he knew about her. Grey, probably the touring palette, worn with the looseness of someone who'd picked it up rather than been organised into it. And a window. And through the window, the city she had lived in for 7 years after the transfer, the city she'd spent 7 years fighting from the inside, the city she'd ultimately decided she was too tired to keep inhabiting. He thought about what she'd said on the step in the blocks. I think it stops. I think it's like the sleep I don't have anymore except it doesn't end. He thought about her face when she said it, the specific calm of it. I find that I don't mind that. The council has been notified, Sarah said behind him. There will be a formal review of the circumstances, given the active investigation. The circumstances are not complicated, Clover said. He didn't turn from the window. She made a choice. The council will want to determine whether the choice was. Sarah, he turned then. She was still in the middle of the room with her eyes that were almost not level. She was a transferred consciousness with full cognitive autonomy. She made a choice about her own existence. The council can review the paperwork all it wants. That's what happened. Sarah was quiet. Is there anything, she began. No, he said, thank you for telling me. She looked at him for a moment with the almost not level eyes. Then she moved to the door. At the door she stopped. Mr. Clover, she said. Yes. A pause, long enough that he looked at her. Sarah started, stopped. Something was happening in her expression that he had not seen there before. The half-beat delay was gone. The expression wasn't located, it arrived. She was not like the others, Sarah said. The other residents, she stopped again. I know, he said quietly. Sarah stood in the doorway for another moment. Then she left, and the door closed behind her, and he was alone in the white workspace with his 3 identical trees, and his sourceless light, and his pages of notes, and his pen lying where he'd left it. He stood at the window for a long time. The administration moved quickly, he'd grant them that. By the 2nd administrative hour after Sarah's visit, there was an official notification distributed to touring citizenry, brief, formal, the language of civic communication that said the necessary minimum and nothing more. Councillor Raven, formerly of the Administrative Council, has concluded her residency in touring. The phrase had been chosen with the care of people who understood that words were also tools of management. Concluded her residency. As though she'd moved somewhere else. As though this was a transition rather than a choice. He read the notification on his wall display and thought about Aldous' policy documents and their clean language, and thought that some things were consistent. There was a second document, distributed internally to the investigative liaison team, which meant Sarah, which meant Clover. This one was more specific. It noted that the circumstances of Raven's deactivation were under review in the context of the ongoing investigation into Aldous' death. It noted that any connection between the two events was to be considered a matter of administrative sensitivity. It noted that public communication regarding this matter should be coordinated through official channels. He read administrative sensitivity and thought about Appendix C and its workforce extraction projections and the specific consistency of a system that always found the clean language. He put the document down. He picked up his pen. He kept writing. He went to the blocks in the 4th administrative hour. He didn't plan to, or rather, he didn't decide to in the way that involved deliberation. He simply found himself at the gate, the way he'd found himself at Vex's door, following a logic that was operating below the level of conscious direction. The gate figures let him through without anything beyond their usual tracking. He was a known quantity now, the frozen detective who came and went, who ate at Marin's Market and talked to block residents and had been seen sitting on steps with Raven. Had been seen, past tense. The investigation had already restructured itself in his mind around that tense. The blocks knew. He understood that within the first 30 seconds of being through the gate. He couldn't have said exactly how he knew the blocks were doing the same things they always did, the same noise and movement and smell of cooking, the same daily life proceeding at full volume. But there was a quality underneath it that was different. A register had shifted. The specific frequency of a community that had received news and was processing it in the collective way that communities process things. Not loudly, not all at once, but pervasively, the news moving through the social fabric the way water moved through a sponge, reaching everything. He made his way to Marin's table. She was there, she was always there. She saw him coming and did not move and did not change her expression, but there was something in her stillness that acknowledged everything. He sat on the edge of the table's structure. Not behind it, not at it, the side, the way you sat when you didn't want to be a customer, but needed to be near someone. Neither of them spoke for a moment. Around them the market proceeded. People moved through it with the morning's business, and some of them looked at Clover and some of them didn't, and all of them had the register, the shifted frequency. "When did you find out?" he said. "3rd hour," Marin said. "Petra's daughter works in the administrative infrastructure maintenance systems. She heard it move through the channels." A pause. "It moved fast to us, faster than they probably expected." "They put out a notification," he said. "Concluded her residency." Marin made a sound that was not quite a word. It conveyed what needed conveying. "How are people taking it?" he said. Marin was quiet for a moment, arranging things on her table that didn't need arranging. Her hands doing the small work that hands did when the mind was carrying something heavy. "They're sad," she said. "Most of them, the ones who knew her, the ones who knew her name without knowing her, they're sad." She paused. "And some of them are angry that she's gone, that another thing that was good for them is gone." She looked at him with the direct eyes. "People in here have a lot of practice losing things that were good for them." He looked at the market. At the people moving through it with their sadness and their anger and their daily business proceeding anyway, because that was what daily business did. "And you," he said. Marin looked at the table. She was quiet for long enough that he thought she wasn't going to answer. "I knew it was coming," she said finally. "Not the when, but I knew." She paused. You could see it in her the last few visits. She was saying goodbye the whole time, the way she looked at everything, the way she touched things. She shook her head, like she was trying to take them with her. He thought about Raven in the courtyard, looking at the painted walls with the complete attention, the cat near her feet, the bread. Like she was trying to take them with her. "She loved this place," he said. Yes, Marin said, she did, a long pause, and she was tired and she was in pain and she'd done what she came to do. She looked at him steadily. I'm not going to pretend I don't wish she was still here. I'm not going to pretend the grief isn't real and large and going to be here for a long time. She put both hands flat on the table. But she was a person who made her choices with her whole self, that's who she was, and this was her choice. He looked at Marin's hands on the table. Flat, palms down. The same gesture as Aldous at his desk, arranged with care by the person who had understood that dignity mattered even at the end of things. The same gesture as his own hands on the glass of his window an hour ago. Some gestures were just human, they kept arriving regardless. She told me to make sure the courtyard was in the record, he said, the painted walls. Marin looked at him. She brought me there this morning, he said. She said nobody from the other side had seen it, she said it should be in the record. Marin was quiet for a moment. Then, she always said that place was the truest thing in touring. A pause. She said if you wanted to understand what people actually were, you went to what they made when nobody was watching and there was no reward for making it. He thought about that. About Vex's walls, centuries of thinking written on every available surface because the thoughts needed somewhere to go. About the block's walls, colour on colour, many hands over many years, beauty made in the available space. Both kinds of walls, both kinds of people or things approaching people making the same fundamental gesture, I was here, I had an interior life, here is the evidence. There's a baby, he said. Yes, something shifted in Marin's expression, through the grief a different quality. She's sleeping right now, she doesn't know anything yet. A pause, she'll know the name. She'll know what it means, Clover said. We'll make sure of that, Marin said, quietly, definitively. The way Raven had said tomorrow, the lawyer's word, the word that closed argument. He sat with Marin at her table as the administrative morning moved through its operations, and the blocks processed their grief in the collective way of communities that had processed many things and kept going. People came to the table, conducted their business, left. Some of them looked at Clover with the assessing eyes, and some of them nodded to him, and one old man pressed his hand briefly and said nothing and moved on. At some point Seb appeared. He didn't say anything. He came and stood near Clover with his sharp eyes and his self-possessed face, and the composure of a child who had been told something hard, and was processing it in the way he processed everything, directly, without flinching, with the full weight of it accepted. Clover looked at him. The beetle, Seb said, on the wall. I saw it, Clover said. This morning it's exactly right. Seb looked at the market. He was quiet for a moment. She told me to look at it for a long time before I painted it, he said. She said that was the rule. You had to look at the thing until you understood it, not just what it looked like, what it was. She was right, Clover said. I know, Seb said. He stood a while longer. Then he went back into the market and was absorbed into it, and Clover watched him go, the sharp-eyed boy who had been taught to look at things until he understood them. He left the blocks in the early administrative afternoon. At the gate he stopped and turned back. He looked at the blocks the way Raven had looked at them that morning, the full view from the gate, the market audible, the streets feeding into streets, the buildings particular and patched and occupied. He looked at it for a long time. Then he went back to his workspace. He sat at the desk. He looked at his pen and his papers, and the true report accumulating in his specific handwriting. He thought about the specific grief of losing someone who chose to go. He'd been trying to find the right word for it since the 4th administrative hour and had not found it yet. It wasn't the grief of a death, or it was adjacent to it, in the same family of feelings but distinct. Death was imposed. This was chosen. And the choosing, the fact of the choosing, did something to the grief that made it more complicated rather than less. Because you couldn't be angry at death. Death didn't have intentions. But a choice had a person behind it, and the person had reasons, and the reasons were good reasons, and you understood the reasons, and you'd sat in a forgotten courtyard and eaten bread with the person, and listened to them explain the reasons and understood them completely. And still was the grief, the thing that sat beneath the understanding, the part that understood everything and felt it anyway. He sat with it. Then he picked up his pen. He wrote for a long time, and what he wrote was honest and complete and said the true thing without the clean language. And in the section about Raven he wrote her name fully and often and described her as she had been present, completely present, the most alive thing in a city of the permanent. And he wrote about the courtyard and the walls and the beetle and Marin's bread, and what she had said on the step and what she had not said, and what the silence had meant. He wrote it so that whoever read it, in whatever year, in whatever version of this city, would know that she had been here. That she had been the right kind of difficult. That her name had earned itself. Outside, the administrative evening continued its sourceless operation. Inside the blocks, in a room somewhere, a baby named Raven was sleeping without knowing anything yet. She would know the name. Marin had made sure of that.